Okay, so now with this example, I'm going to translate these symbols, these symbolic statements, into verbal statements, okay? So now listen to, I'm not going to write it all out and just take too much time, and since you can pause this video and just pay attention and write down what I say. Now it doesn't have to be exactly what I say, but again, make sure you're very careful on how you phrase things, because you want to make sure that whoever reads it is going to be able to reconstruct your words into symbolics and come back to what is here, okay? If they can't, then you didn't do a very good job, or you're very vague, or you weren't very articulate into making sure you expressed it correctly. So pay attention to the way I verbalize these, okay? So let's start with the first one, okay? So in the first one, we're dealing with x minus 7 is equal to 4. Okay, so what's going on here? Okay, so what's going on? So we have x minus 7 equals 4. So one of the things that I can say is, okay, I can describe what's going on here. I can describe this statement by saying that when 7 is subtracted from a number, that equals 4. Okay? So that describes what's happening here. Okay? When 7 is subtracted from a number, that will give me 4. That equals 4. Or another way to say, I could say a number minus 7 equals will give me 4. Okay? But I think it's better to actually verbalize what's going on. If you subtract 7 from a number, that's going to give you 4. Okay? Now what about here? Well, what's going on here? Well, in this case, I'm taking a number, I'm dividing that number by 5, and that will give me 3. So a number divided by 5 will give me 3. Okay? Make sense? Now what about the next one? So here's one way that I could verbalize it. I could say, okay, if you take a number and double it, right? So if I take a number and I multiply that number by 2, and then I take that product and I add 3 to it, that result will give me 15. Right? I mean, anyone who listens to that phrase will be able to reconstruct the symbolic statement, right? Now the way I'm going to phrase it now would not be good. Okay? If I just said, well, if I take a number, if I take 2 times a number plus 3 is going to give me 15. So think about that. I said, if I take 2 times the number plus 15, 2 times the number plus 15. Well, is that telling me this? Or is that telling me this? See what I mean by it's vague? Because 2 times the number plus 15, is that 2 times a number plus 15? Or is it 2 times a number plus 15? Right? So you gotta be careful. So again, watch the way I phrased it. I said, okay, if you take 2 times a number and then add 3 to that product, see what I said there? Then that sum will give me 15. So it's important that you phrase it accurately and using, you want to be concise, but you also want to be accurate in describing what's going on. Okay? So again, just be careful with that. Okay? Another way is you could say 15 is the result of taking a number and doubling that number and then adding 3 to the product. Okay, that's another way of phrasing it that would also work. Okay, what about this one? Now here, I've got the grouping, right? So now watch how I phrase this. Okay, so if you take a number plus 3, or here's another way to say it. I could say, if you take the sum, okay, so 14 is the result of taking the sum of a number and 3, right? So the word sum implies that I'm going to be adding the next two numbers together. So if I say the sum of this and that, right? So here I could say 14 is the result of taking the sum of a number and 3 and multiplying that by 2. So I could say that. Or I could say, hey, if I take a number plus 3, or if I take the sum of a number and 3, either way of those would work, and multiply that sum by 2, the result is 14. So that will work too. So again, there's different ways of phrasing it, but again, make sure the way you phrase it is not vague or ambiguous.